So because I can see some new names here. So my name is Diana Vasilenko. I'm one of the CELTA trainers. Actually, I'm a CELTA and Delta Module 2 trainer at International Language Center and in Kiev, Ukraine. And one of the, well, at the moment, my main job is teacher training. But well, unfortunately, I don't have that much time to do teaching, but the only teaching that I do nowadays is actually exam preparation, because that's my lifelong passion. As a person who had to take exams at some point, had to take TOEFL years ago. Yeah, it's been too long if you come to think of that. And I started my teaching career as an exam preparation teacher, actually, even before my CELTA, or the equivalent that I did. So, and that's why, well, no, actually, that's why I'm talking about IELTS preparation today. But another reason why I decided to choose this topic is because I work with teachers, and some of them don't feel confident enough to start preparing their students for IELTS. And it is a big responsibility, it's true. And sometimes, and IELTS is a special exam. First of all, it's one of the most popular exams and most widely recognized exams in the world. So if you take IELTS, well, normally you're covered for the next 2 years, because you can use that certificate and your IELTS score for immigration purposes, for work purposes, etc. For studying. A lot of universities accept that, and actually don't accept, they demand it. That's one of the requirements. And but it is a bit special because it's different from the exams a lot of us are used to, like ZNO. And if you've heard of Cambridge exams, this one is different. And what makes it so special is that there is one exam for everyone, regardless of their level. So if you're an elementary student, you will have to take IELTS. If you're a proficient language user, you're going to have to take IELTS as well. There aren't many different versions of this exam. So the webinar today is actually for, the webinar today is for teachers who are considering preparing students for IELTS, or actually for those people who have already started but would like to get some more information about this exam. If you're an experienced IELTS teacher, who knows, there might be something interesting today, but most of the information I give today will be sort of general to equip people with the right skills and some basic knowledge about the exam and the resources they will need to get started when preparing students for IELTS. Okay, so I've talked about myself for some time. Now it's your turn, and I'd like to learn something about you. As I mentioned, yes, I do know I can recognize some of the people in the chat there, but I'd like you to introduce yourself, if you don't mind, of course. So could you please write in the chat box the city you're from, the school, company, university where you work, the age of your students, and number of years in teaching, if you are a teacher, of course. Who knows, there could be some people who are not teachers, or students, or teachers considering taking IELTS at some point. Could be useful for them as well, right? So please write the answers in the chat box. All right. All right. So Ruslana works with students at Teresa University. Nice. And a teaching company. Yes, quite a range of different ages. 6 years in teaching, yes. Mhm. All right, adults, 5 years of teaching experience. All right, welcome, Veronica, as well. Okay, so you can continue writing. I'm going to move on. So here's something I'd like to get started with. I'd like you to take a minute and read the statements, 7 statements on this slide. And please write which sentences are false, in your opinion, about the IELTS exam. Right? So please take a couple of minutes. Which ones are false? Mm-hmm. All right, I can see some answers. Mm-hmm. Anything else? One to 7, all of them? Most of them are true, actually. All right, nobody likes number 2. This is interesting. All right, so let's talk about this. So, well, there will be something interesting for people during the session today. That's for sure. Now I'm quite positive about that. All right, so here's the first one. Possible marks for IELTS are from 0 to 9. True, kind of, because basically, it's very difficult to get a 0 only if you do not submit your mark sheets. Don't touch the computer and do not open your mouth, because yes, the 0 is there, but it is reserved for those instances when there no evidence of response has been produced. So if you show up for the exam, normally you will and do something, you will probably get 1. But yes, the 0 does exist. Let's move on to number 2. That's the good one. Yeah, there are actually 3 kinds of IELTS tests, not 2. So the general and the academic modules or tests, as they refer to them, but there is also an IELTS for life skills exam, which is used by the UK for some immigration visas. Fiancé visa is one of them, I think. And that test, there are 3 versions of that test. So A1, A2, and B1. If I remember correctly, there is also listening and speaking tested there. So basically, this is for people whose command of English is quite limited, but they do need to function in an English-speaking environment. That's why listening and speaking are tested there. So reading and speaking parts are the same for general and academic tests. This is false, because actually listening and speaking are the same. Reading and writing are different for those 2 modules, and we're going to talk about this. There's different version of IELTS that you need to take for working and studying in the UK. That is true, and well, actually, it's a bit more expensive. It's not much different from real IELTS. The only problem is that there is another kind of sort of layer of security there, and the speaking is also video recorded. So all IELTS tests, speaking tests, are recorded with voice recorders, but the UKVI, United Kingdom Visas and Immigration version is also video recorded. There are 2 parts in the writing module. That is true, and we're going to talk about it more. It is impossible to fail it, because even if you get 1, you still kind of passed it. Probably the result you expected a different or wanted a different result, but still. And the last one, you can take IELTS without leaving your home. That one is definitely false. Even with the COVID 2020, well, COVID-19 that we have to deal with in 2020, some changes have happened to the exam, and there is an IELTS indicator test which can be taken from home, but it is stated by everyone that it's not that reliable, and not all universities will accept it, and probably even if they accept it, you will still have to take IELTS when you can go back into the test room, and that score will be accepted by the university. So the IELTS indicator test shows that, well, yes, probably you can function in English, but nobody is sure about it. Yeah. All right. Well, let's start talking about the preparation. So what does the teacher need to know about the student or the students? Can you write some information in the chat box? So your student wants to take IELTS. What are the things you need to ask them about before you start working with them? Please write some ideas in the chat box. Yes, why take IELTS? Level of knowledge, absolutely. All right, so I can see only 2 points. I have more. Would anybody like to guess what they are? All right, here are my answers. Yes, the level, that is absolutely correct. So we need to know their level of English proficiency, where they are at the moment. So are they B1, B2, or A1, which is also possible. IELTS score now. So it is a good idea to give them some sort of practice test. A lot of people, when they come to, well, they start preparing on their own. So when they come to you, they've probably taken a couple of tests. So they might know the answer, the average band for different skills. What band the student needs to achieve, that's a very important one, because there are 9 bands, and depending on their reasons or on why they need this exam, the band scores will differ. Most universities, for the bachelor's degree, the entry band is normally 6 for the bachelor's degree. For master's programs, it's normally higher and is 7. For immigration, quite often it is 7. But for some, for the spouse visa, it could be 4. So you need to know what band they actually want to tell them what band they can actually get. Why they want to take the exam, because not all of them know about the modules they need to take. And I've seen people who take IELTS, the normal academic version of IELTS, but they want to use the score when applying for university in the UK, but they should have taken the UKVI version of the exam. So we need to warn them about that. When they need to take the exam, that's a very important one, because quite often you will hear something like, today's the 14th of November, say like, yeah, end of December, please, because they want to have their score in January, because this is when they need to send it to the university. Yeah, and so we need to know how much time we have. So quite often IELTS preparation is quite intensive. And how much time they can spend learning English a week. If they want to make progress, if they want to get a much higher band, I've had situations where people actually had to quit their real jobs and spend months preparing for IELTS. And one of the most amazing results was a person who was tested in June as a pre-intermediate student, which is kind of A2, B1. And in 5 months, she got IELTS 7. that was probably one of the most impressive, achievements I've seen so far. But that doesn't happen very often. So, computer-based IELTS. This is, again, there are two different, modes of the test at the moment. I think they started doing computer-based IELTS in Ukraine back in 2017. And this proved to be quite a popular version. So I'm going to talk about some things which make it different from the paper-based IELTS. First of all, there are more days to choose from, because normally, as a lot of Cambridge exams, IELTS is done on Saturdays and there is another window on Thursday. So if you do the paper-based IELTS, that means that there are normally no more than 2 days a week when you can take it. And it depends on the center where you want to take it, if they have a session for that day or not. That's why Thursday sessions are normally not very popular. Most of them happen on Saturdays. But for the computer-based exams, there are definitely more dates. And at some centers, you might even have to choose the option in terms of morning, afternoon, or evening. But it doesn't happen often, but it exists. So the results are available after 3 to 5 days, and you can see them online. You can normally register for this exam much closer to the date, because they do not have to have the printed material sent to them. So it's much easier with computer-based exams. The good thing is, well, for me, it's a good thing, because when I have to write for a long time, I do get tired and my hand starts to hurt. But I do type quite fast. So, and for a lot of people, typing is a much better option, than handwriting something. So that's why computer-based IELTS is becoming more and more popular nowadays. There is a clock on the screen and you can actually watch the time. There is no need to transfer your answers because they're saved automatically. With the paper-based version, for example, with listening, you will have 10 more minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. And believe it or not, this is where a lot of mistakes in the listening and reading papers happen, because it's very easy to skip a line and just start writing wrong answers or omit something. So that's another advantage, I would say, of the computer-based IELTS. And better quality of sound from the headset, normally. Still, it is better than sitting in some conference room in a hotel with the sound coming from the loudspeakers and some third person adjusting the volume for you. You can do it yourself if you take the computer-based IELTS. Right. So this is the question that a lot of people ask, and this is the question, this is one of the problems that I sometimes deal with, because there is so much published in terms of IELTS preparation by so many publishers that it's very difficult to choose something. So I've looked at some books that we have in our teacher's room. Yes, I was in charge of ordering some of them. There are some books that I like, some of them that I don't like. So, but there are some main things that you need to know about the books available for IELTS preparation. So the first one is the course book for the level. When I talked about a student, I said that normally there is just one person who wants to take IELTS and you need to know what their bands are. But these books that you can see on the screen right now, they're normally intended for groups of learners. But in my opinion, it doesn't happen very often. I don't normally see a lot of Band 4, if you can see on the completed IELTS cover. 10 Band 4 people who want to take IELTS in a year. That doesn't happen very often in my teaching context. Normally they're kind of Band 5-ish, and they want Band 7 in a month. These are the people I work with. And technically, these are the books I normally do not use. But if there is a student whose level of English is lower, it might be difficult for them to cope with the material from other books, because those books normally start with Band 6. So these are the course books that we have, and you can, I've seen those. I think the lowest level of the course book was Band 4. So for some of them, you'll need to buy a teacher's book. This is important. Some of them have the workbooks, but some of them, the workbook is online. So when you decide on the book, check what the components are to make sure that you don't miss out on anything. And sometimes a lot of those books can actually be used as self-study materials. So quite a lot of them have the answer key in the student's book. So this way you don't have to buy the teacher's book. Those books contain strategies, some basic exam strategies, practice tests. There is, in a lot of them, the grammar syllabus is included. So there will be something on the language and on grammar, because, well, some input like past tenses, present perfect, future tenses, so it's there. Some grammar sections could be added to the speaking and writing sections, because this is the useful language. And if you look at IELTS books, even grammar is often seen as useful language that can be used in that part and in that sort of task. Not many of the books out there are for the general module preparation. So, well, the good news is there aren't that many people who want to take the general module. And for them, you can probably use some general English books, especially for lower levels. But please be careful and check which module the book is for. And, of course, the target band. There are exam preparation books. Yeah, I took a picture of the books that we have in the teacher's room, and these are the ones that I like. The Complete Guide to IELTS is a new version. It's actually quite good. It has a lot of different types of tasks. The only problem is that it does have mistakes, unfortunately. So you have to, it's a good idea if you start using that book, which is a great resource. Please do the tasks yourself before you give them to the students to avoid some misunderstanding and confusion. So if we talk about exam preparation books, normally they kind of for all levels. And the standard band is Band 6 for them. So if someone is intermediate, probably this book will be a bit difficult for them. So the starting bands are 5, 5.5, and the highest band is normally 7+, which could be 8. I haven't seen any books that can prepare people for a 9. So, but yeah, it's, I think, no, I don't think I will see that book anyways. So those books contain exam practice strategies, sorry, no practice. They contain exam practice tasks and tests, a lot of useful language, and some of them will have a grammar reference section. Again, in my experience, I do prefer using these books because with the intensive IELTS preparation, there isn't much time to focus on the grammar and teach them grammar. So you just go through the chapters in these books, picking the things that your student needs more help with. And that seems to work in my experience. Practice tests. Yes, of course, it's good to have them. If you look at the practice tests here, well, one of them is just standard tests. Yeah, there will be some mention of the exam strategies. Also the IELTS trainer, and there are some test builders available out there, which are good books to have, really. But the most important one is the official IELTS practice materials, the red one in the middle. This is a must-have book, or booklet or whatever, for an IELTS prep teacher, because it actually has the IELTS past papers. They're quite expensive, they're quite rare, but it will give you a clear idea of where they are, and you can use them as mock exams. Well, of course, there is a lot of there are lots of practice tests out there in the world, in the books, online. But these ones, the official IELTS practice test materials, those are the most reliable ones, and they will give you a probably better understanding of the real score that they can achieve. So practice test books normally have writing samples, which is quite helpful with the bands actually. Summary of exam strategies, some useful language boxes, common mistakes to avoid. You need to be aware of the level of challenge, and that it's, again, and I know that we don't have time for that, but it's a very good idea to try and do those tests yourself. Not all of them, just one, just to see what the level of difficulty is. Because some books and some practice tests are easier than the real exam or more difficult. Most of them are easier. So the result that students get could be a bit disappointing. And you also need to be aware of the fact that not all of them contain the general module. If you look at the 3 books that I have here on this picture, I can say that only the one in the middle, official practice test materials, have some information about the general module. The rest of them don't. Of course, there are some other useful books for IELTS. So some of them focus on the skills, speaking, listening, reading. There are books on IELTS writing. I do recommend finding them and looking at them because they will contain some useful information, but of course not all of it will be useful and necessary and relevant to your students' needs. And this is my favorite book, Check Your English Vocabulary for IELTS. This is a much older version. There is a newer version available, but yes, so it's a good one. And Grammar for IELTS. I can say that I really like that book, but it does help on some occasions. I do feel it's better to actually to see what they can do and see what they need, and based on that, help them with grammar. All right. So here's some information about the exams. You can see 2 different modules here. You start, those people who take the IELTS exam, they start with the listening module, which lasts for approximately 30 minutes. Then it is followed by the reading module or reading test. There are different names for those. And ironically, so they're called passages in the academic module and sections in the general module. Yeah, and this part is different for both exams. Writing is also different. This is the 3rd test that people have to take on the day. And task 1 for the academic module is a summary of some graphs and charts and an essay. And in the general module, people have to write a letter and an essay. So task 2 is the same, but task 1 is different for the modules. And speaking is the same for everyone. One important fact, I'm not sure I've included in the slides, but speaking can be done occasionally, can be done on a different day before or after the test. So don't be surprised if your students take it before they take the real exam. No, not the real exam, but the remaining papers or parts. All right, so listening. And it is the same for both modules. It's about 30 minutes long. There are 4 sections. The first one is the easiest one, a conversation between 2 speakers in a social, semi-social context. The second one is actually a talk by one person, so a sort of a monologue on a non-academic situation. Then the third one is a conversation with up to 4 speakers based on an academic topic. And the last one is a university-style lecture or talk. Normally the 4th one is the most difficult to follow because people tend to fall asleep during lectures. All right, important information about the listening. In my opinion, that's the most challenging part of IELTS, despite the fact that a lot of people struggle with the writing paper. And I've heard of horror stories when people had to take IELTS several times and they couldn't get a 7 for their writing. But this part, the listening part of the exam, actually instills fear in me. But again, it's very subjective. So first of all, the level of difficulty increases from section 1 to section 4. You might remember that the test is the same. Whatever your level of English is, you're going to have to take it. So those people who are weaker for pre-intermediate and intermediate students, so they can get a higher score in section 1, and that's how they will get very little in section 4 and get their band 5 and, well, go home with it. The candidates get to listen to the recording only once, which is the most horrible thing about this exam, really, because they're given time to read the questions and then they hear it and that's it. That's what makes it so short. Normally, there is more than one task in each section. If you remember, there are 4 sections. And there could be 2 or sometimes even 3 different types of tasks inside this session, and they will vary. So they need to be careful to read the instructions. But the good news is that the instructions will be given to them. So basically, in each session, they will know which questions they need to answer. Now, listen to the recording and write the answers for gaps 1 to 6. And there will be pauses between the sections. Yes, so there is a pause before each section to look at the task in the section. The instructions are on the question paper and they are recorded as well. At the end of the listening, there will be 10 minutes to copy the answers if you're taking the paper-based version, and correct spelling is important. So if you're working with lower band students, it's very important to teach them to spell words correctly for them to get as much as they can in section 1 of the exam. Yeah, this is what makes IELTS so different from anything else. Listening task types. I decided to add some pictures to this one to show the variety of tasks that we have there. So there could be a sentence completion, note, form, table, flowchart completion, short answer question, so yes, no, or the name, by the way, multiple choice questions with one or more than one answer, and matching. The most favorite for a lot of people is the map and plan diagram labeling. So you can see the lovely picture here. So number 2 is learn something, and you're gonna have to hear some words for the first and the last time in your life, and you have to write them down. So here's the list of some must-have skills for listening, and this could be helpful for the teachers working with IELTS preparation students. These are the important skills to teach them and to raise their awareness of. And the first one is waking up. Yes, listening is normally the first thing that happens to you on the day of the exam. If you're taking the computer-based IELTS, it's likely to start at 9 o'clock in the morning. Whether you get off the train or just get yourself to that conference room where the exam is administered, it can be quite difficult to concentrate and to pull yourself together for the listening. So they need to be aware of that. Listen to the instructions and focus on the questions they need to answer. So reading the rubric is always important. Sometimes people look at the task and they think they know what they need to do there. No, they need to read and listen. Prediction is a useful skill for that. When they look at the questions, they need to think about what sort of answers to listen out for. And listening for specific information is quite important. Those people who have done CELTA and, well, who've been teaching for many years, they probably heard of listening for gist and specific information. So just listening here is not a skill which can be assessed because you get to listen to the recording only once. Of course, some would, well, it is kind of there. You will need to understand what the text is about. But listening for specific information is much more important for IELTS. Noting down numbers and spelling proper names fast and accurately. Again, this is a must-have skill for lower level students because this will help them to gain some marks. Identifying distractors because quite often some things are mentioned, but they're not the correct answer. Listening carefully to the discourse markers, which is of great use in section 4 when you have to listen to the lecture because it's very difficult to navigate there, and those discourse markers like next, secondly, moving on to the next point. Another argument I'd like to mention, those will be the things that will help them to be focused and to understand when to move on to the next question. Okay, now reading. So yeah, and we'll talk about the general module first. So there are 60 minutes for 40 questions. Section 1 is 2 or more texts in social situations. Could be some announcements, could be notices there. So it's quite enjoyable and not that difficult and very practical actually for those people whose command of English is rather limited, let's put it this way, but they need to be able to survive in an English-speaking country. Section 2, there are 2 texts based on work or course-related situations. And section 4, 1 text that tests general reading comprehension. So the general module is not that difficult. The academic module, the reading there, is more challenging. Again, you get 60 minutes and 40 questions to answer. Passage 1 is the text with mostly textual information. So here there is not much inference, opinions, or arguments, just facts. Actually, it's factual information, not textual. Gosh, I need to change that. Passage 2 is factual information and opinions and arguments. And the third one is the most difficult one, which requires more detailed comprehension and deeper understanding of the arguments and inference. Again, if we talk about the task types, they're quite similar to the listening part, but the one that is missing in the listening, thank God, is the true, false, or not given. This is one of the worst tasks that exists in the world of English assessment. And I think in the Cambridge exams, the main suite exams, like they used to have it as part of the preliminary exam, they got rid of it because they think it's too challenging. Well, in IELTS, we still have that. The most difficult thing is actually this thin line between false and not given. So no table, flowchart, completion diagram labeling. So we saw that in the listening paper, short answer questions, matching headings, information, and features. This is something that is not in the listening. And this is when you need to match the headings or pieces of information to the paragraphs. Multiple choice questions, again, with 1 correct answer or several correct answers. Sentence completion. Summary completion, in most cases using the words from the text. Matching sentence endings, again, this is more factual information. Identifying the writer's views and claims, this is the worst one. Because this one does test inference, and we actually, well, not many people can get it, and this is a skill to practice, especially for higher band learners. Must-have skills for reading. So this is what we need to develop in our students. Reading the rubric and understanding the task. Again, I cannot overemphasize this really, because this is the most important part of any exam, especially with IELTS, where task types change quite a lot, and you do not expect the same sort of task in section 2, for example. You can get all sorts of question types there, and they need to read the rubric carefully. Well, familiarity with task types will be helpful and will help your students feel more confident. So you need to try to give them as much exposure to different task types as possible. Watching the time, of course, and transferring the answers. Skimming for general idea. And one of the techniques I normally recommend is reading the first sentence of each paragraph to get the general idea of the paragraph, because normally the first sentence is the topic sentence. And it will give them some idea of what the text is about and where to look for the information they need. Scanning. Yes, an absolute must-have for IELTS, because a lot of questions will contain names and they will need to match names or people to different arguments. This is what happens here as well. Understanding unknown words from context. This is a useful skill, it really is. And yeah, I'd like to talk a bit more about it, and probably at some point I will, but not today. So do not, well, try to encourage them to understand words from the context. There are some exercises in books to help with that. And of course, you as their teacher need to be able to help them with that, like negative and positive meaning, parts of speech, negative prefixes. All of that will help them in the real exam. And pre-teaching blocking vocabulary is not going to help them here. Identifying distractors, yes. Similar to the listening module, there will be some distractors, and they need to be able to, well, normally they need to finish reading the text and see what's happening in the next paragraph, not to be fooled by the first answer that looks correct to them. Spotting words and phrases with similar meaning. Not leaving any questions unanswered. Again, this is something that we need to warn them. If people take IELTS, they normally take it because they have to, not because they want to. And yes, they do want to get a higher score, and they won't get anything for blank answer sheets. So please encourage them to write at least something, even if they're not sure, even if they have no idea, they need to put something down there. Copy the answers onto the answer sheet after you've completed the task. Yes, and being very careful with that. And with the reading, because with listening, you normally listen for 30 seconds and then you're given 30 minutes, and then you're given 10 minutes to transfer the answers to the answer sheet. With the reading, you do not have that time. There is no extra time given. So it's a good idea to finish one section, transfer the answers. Finish the next section, transfer the answers. Because it does happen that sometimes people just simply don't have time to transfer the answers onto the answer sheet, and this is how they basically don't get the score or the band that they want. Here's some useful links for listening and reading. Might be a good idea to take a screenshot. Now, there will be a recording of this session, but just have a look and take a screenshot of this. IELTS Official for task types. That's a very useful website, really. IELTS Band Score Calculator also helps. IELTS Liz. This is an interesting resource. There are some things that I like about it. There are some things that I hate about it, but there is a lot of information there. There is a lot of strategies and a lot of example tasks, so sample tasks for reading, writing, and speaking, of course. Yes. So, and practice tests online. Quite a good resource. All right. Moving on to the writing. So here's how it is assessed. Let's have a look at all 4 of them. So first of all, there is task achievement, which deals with the content. And that's why they need to read the rubric quite carefully to make sure they include all the content points in their writing. There is the extension and development of ideas. Of course, just including the points is good enough for bands 4 and 5, but extension and development, this is what will take them higher, possibly to band 7 or even higher than that. Coherence and cohesion. So it deals with how the text is organized into paragraphs, how paragraphs are organized by putting the sentences in the most appropriate order using appropriate linkers and cohesive devices, like referencing as well. And the lexical resource, range and control of lexis and spelling. Yes, spelling is assessed here. Of course, for lower bands like 4 or 5, probably it's not going to be a big issue unless the word is misspelled out of recognition. But for higher levels, their spelling has to be damn good and accurate. Grammatical range and accuracy. With Cambridge exams, and IELTS is not an exception here, you can actually, our students need to know that they can get a higher band if they take risks. Because using present simple perfectly well without any mistakes is not good enough. They do need to show a range of structures, passives, future, perfect tenses, and everything. So even if they make mistakes when using more complex structures, they will still get a higher band than they would if they decide not to use any complex structures. So this is something for them to be aware of and for us to teach them. So writing general module, so it's 1 hour long. The first part is writing a letter, 150 words long at least, and recommended time is 20 minutes. Part 2 is the essay, and they need to write at least 250 words, and the recommended time is 40 minutes. So what do we as teachers need to focus on and help them with when preparing them for writing part 1? First of all, it's opening and closing the letter. For example, name or no name. So here's the example. Dear sir, madam, you end it if you do not know the name of the person with yours faithfully. If you know the name of the person, yours sincerely or truly yours. They need to include all the content points, and they need to be able to identify them in the task as before they start writing. They need to use imagination to use detail to the situation in the task. For example, if they're writing a letter of complaint to restaurant managers, they will need to include more detail on what was wrong. Using paragraphs, yes. Probably this will sound obvious, but if you look at the criteria for assessing writing and band descriptors, you will see that if they do not break the text into paragraphs, they cannot get anything higher than band 5. I was surprised when I saw that, because I was like, well, really? People don't use paragraphs? But apparently band 5 is good enough for you. You don't have to. It's necessary to have some good command of formulaic expressions and functional language. And as teachers, this is definitely something we can help them with. Now, I'm going to talk about part 2 for both modules, general and academic. So let's have a look at the structure of the academic module. So the first one is summary of some graphic or some graphic information, graphs and charts that we all love. And yeah, the number of words is the same, 150, and the recommended time is 20 minutes. They need to write at least 250 words for the essay, which is the same for both modules, general and academic. And here's the academic module, part 1. This is something that I remember 10 years ago, when I was looking at this, I would start falling asleep. Now I look at it and I want to get done with it. I do not like it, but isn't this pretty? And this shows you some range of what sort of information they might get in writing part 1. So there could be describing processes, bar charts, line graphs, yes, flow charts, tables. So it's, well, and you never know what you're going to get. So how can we help them prepare for this? First of all, read the rubric. I'm talking about part 1 here. And they need to know what exactly the task is asking of them. They need to be able to understand and interpret visual information. Again, 10 years ago, for me, that was difficult. That all looked like one thing. It depends on their background. It depends on the education they have. For some people, this could be difficult. The important thing is to be able to identify the main trends or differences. And main is the key word here, because they do not simply need to describe the information they see there. They need to summarize and comment on the main trends. They need to organize information into paragraphs. Here, opinions are different, but still there should be some sort of introduction and conclusion. And they need to decide, make the decision on their own, how many paragraphs they're going to include in the main part, in the body of the writing. And here are some of the language features or that they will need. So it's past simple, quite often used. Present perfect is not very common in this sort of task. Comparatives and superlatives, especially when talking about, well, comparing the data. Language of describing trends and changes, like increase, there was a dip, it leveled off, etc., etc. So there are lots of useful phrases there, because they do need to show a range of language, not just use increase and decrease all the time. Numbers and amounts. Here I would also comment on the percentages, phrases like the majority, and passers for describing processes. All right, so writing part 2. This is one of my favorite parts actually in the exam. Normally, there are 3 main types of essays that you will see in the books. So, sorry, going back. This is the opinion essay. Another word for that is, another name for this is thesis-led. For and against essay, argument-led essay, and problems and solutions. But there could be some mixing and matching happening there, so you do need to read the rubric carefully. Let's have a look at some example tasks, and finally, you will get the chance to contribute to this webinar. So here are the 3 types: opinion essay, for and against, and problems and solutions, numbers 1, 2, and 3. Have a look at this question, exam question, and write the number in the chat box. What sort of essay do you need to write for this one? Thank you, Veronica. Yes, absolutely. So this is an opinion essay. You're absolutely right. Let's have a look at the second one. There's one more. Please write the answer. This is number 2. Good. Agreed. How about the third one? Yes, so this is closer to part 2 with some elements of 1. Because your opinion is important, yeah. So it's 1 and 2. And here's the last one. What do you think? Right, so what are the answers here? Right, 3 and 1, I would say. So here, here you can see a sort of combination. So they do need to read. The reason why I decided to do this exercise with you, because we need to understand the importance of reading the rubric, because they need to answer the question, not to write an opinion essay. No, they need to be able to read the question, understand what exactly they need to include, and know and make the decisions when and how to include that, and to support the points made. Right, well, thank you. Now, this is normally the structure of the essay, and I think I stole it from some TOEFL book years ago when I had to take that exam. So, but I still find it quite helpful. So one of the important things is the organization, is how you start the essay, and this is the introduction. So you need to highlight you need to move from the general to specific, to your opinion, or to the topics you're going to discuss in this particular situation for the introduction. Then 3 paragraphs. And here it's quite important, because actually some time ago, I don't even know how to say. So there is a rumor, we cannot say that it is confirmed or not, but rumor has it that if you're going for something higher than a 6, you want to get to band 7 and possibly higher, it's a good idea to include not 2 paragraphs, but 3 in the main body of the essay. For example, for the opinion essay, you would state the problem in general in the introduction. Then you would say what you are inclined to believe, to make it more specific. Then there would be the first paragraph of the body to support your opinion. Then paragraph 2 of the main body would be to support your opinion as well. 3 would be addressing the counter argument, why some people might disagree with you. And that's a good that's a nice move, I think, because it helps to make your point more valid, and to prove, to support actually your opinion, and it gives you the chance to understand why they cannot, why your opinion is still correct. And then for the conclusion, you would have to move from specific, summarizing what you've talked about, to general, stating how important this is for the humanity. All right, so we don't have that much time left, so you can take a screenshot of this, but this is just a summary of what to include into each paragraph for different essay types. So you can take a screenshot of this slide. Yeah, so here are some tips for writing for your students to remember about. They do need to read the rubric carefully and underline keywords and identify the content points. Watch the time. They need to write quite a lot, 250 words in 40 minutes. This is a lot. This is a lot of writing to produce, and it has to be accurate. It has to be good. Might be some people recommend this, and I do see the point why. Might be a good idea to start with task 2, as it weighs 66.6 of the total mark for the writing part. So task 2 is more important than task 1. I'm not saying that doing task 2 only is good, but it might be a good idea to start with task 2 to make sure you at least finish that one and then do task 1. Paraphrase. It's of paramount importance not to use the words that they used in the rubric. When writing the essay, you need to be very careful to paraphrase, especially when writing your introduction. So think of synonyms and think how to state the same thing using different words. Because if you just copy the essay question, those will not count towards the general word count for this part. You need to remember not only to include the content, but also fancy language. Remember I mentioned that you do not need to play it safe. You need to use more complex structures to try and get a higher band. Remember to lay out 2 words, not 1, sorry, to lay out the information clearly and organize it into clear and visually separate paragraphs. If you were talking about paper-based exam, it might be a good idea to skip the line. And we remember that the conventions for paragraph and text are a bit different in English, and you do not need to have this indent there. So skipping a line will do the job and will keep your paragraph separate. It's not the best idea to write drafts because you have only 1 hour to write 400 words at least. But it is a good idea to organize your writing. What I normally recommend is using some scrap paper and writing the arguments on a piece of paper. So the topic sentences for the paragraphs in the body, and then using some just short notes on supporting points to help you brainstorm and to help you organize your writing. Here's some useful links. Again, official IELTS for more information about the test. If you don't know, if you haven't started working with IELTS preparation yet, you do need to be aware of the fact that there are IELTS band descriptors. There is a public version for task 1 and task 2. You can actually have a look at them and see what sort of information, of course, they're not as detailed as the ones the examiners have, but how it will give you a clear idea of how writing is assessed. And the last one, IELTS PrepNet for sample writing tasks. And I really like that resource because it also gives some model answers and sometimes even some language exercises in the model answers. So there could be a nice gap fill to help you revise the language. Speaking. We don't have much time. And well, so here's some important information about speaking. You can take a screenshot of that. So as I mentioned before, speaking can be done on a different day. One of the new things about IELTS speaking is that they've introduced video call speaking. If your students are based in Kiev, probably that is not going to affect them. But if they're taking the exam in Odessa or Dnipropetrovsk, this could affect, they might be subject to that. So basically the video call speaking is speaking with the examiner using Zoom or something, or a similar platform. And for the COVID-19 world, that's a good solution to a lot of problems right now. And it does make it possible for people in cities other than Kiev to take IELTS. The speaking part is 14 minutes long. Well, the 14 minutes which are actually recorded. Yes, so there could be like a minute to say hello and to give you some information and for you to sanitize your hands before this exam. All IELTS tests are recorded. If for some reason it was not recorded, you're gonna have to do it again. This is one of the bad things about IELTS. So if something goes wrong on the day of the exam, you will have to do the speaking again. There's also a video recording, as I mentioned, for the UKVI speaking sessions version of the exam. There is only one examiner. This is the person that you talk to and that assesses you. The examiners do interrupt. Please warn your students that examiners have very strict guidelines, especially the ones concerning the timing for different parts of the exam. So it is very typical of them to interrupt the student. So please warn your students not to take it personally. This is just part of their job. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that the person is doing well or not well. You know, this is just what they have to do. If time's up, time's up. Examiners cannot deviate from the script in most parts. So there's no use asking them questions. But there is only one question which is useful for the students, and this is, what does X mean? If they're asked a question and they do not understand the question because there is that one word they don't know, this could happen. This could happen to anyone, really. So they are actually allowed to ask, what does this word mean? If they don't ask it, the examiner won't be able to help them. But if they do, the examiner will have to give them a definition of the word or a synonym. All right, so here's the structure of the speaking test. Part one is the interview, 5 minutes long, and this is where the examiner asks you questions. Of course, they're not very personal. Of course, they're not. There will be something either about your work or studying, and or about the place where you live, and some more topics to discuss. So normally during these parts, well, you can get to know the examiner a little bit, get used to them, get used to their accents, and talk about yourself just a little bit and what you think. Part two is 4 minutes long, and there the candidate is given 1 minute to prepare. They have some paper to make notes on during that minute, and then they need to speak for 2 minutes on the given topic. Normally they say 1 to 2 minutes, but in most cases it is 2 minutes. They need to speak for as long as they can. And part three is the discussion, which is 5 minutes long, and it is linked to the topics in part two. So if you're asked to talk about your favorite weather in the discussion part in part three, you'll start talking about the weather and might end up talking about the climate change. Well, yeah, this is probably some useful links for speaking. Again, similar to writing, there are speaking band descriptors available online, and this information is open and it is legal to share that information. So you can see that on IELTS.org. You can see the band descriptors. Of course, look at the IELTS official channel for speaking, YouTube channel for the sample speaking tests. They can be quite helpful. And especially when you are looking at the band descriptors, you're looking at the candidate's performance, it will help you to have to do some sort of assessment of your students speaking as well after some practice. And IELTS Liz began the website, the resource, useful one, for more speaking tests, topics, and everything. The topics are, well, a lot of them are the same because, come on, well, it's very difficult to invent or add a topic that nobody discussed before. So that's why just doing as many practice speaking tasks as possible is a good idea, right? So, yeah, I guess this is it from me now. No, exam day tips. Yeah, this is important. And I remember that with all of my exam preparation groups, normally, 1 or 2 days before the exam, they start freaking out badly. First, it's a good idea to get a good night's sleep the night before. Yes, they need to try. It could be difficult. Sometimes it could be impossible. I have students who did not perform to the best of their ability because of the fact that they couldn't sleep and they were really, well, not really, they were too nervous to take the exam. So it is important. I normally recommend not doing practice tests 24 hours before the test. It's not going to help. It's going to be counterproductive. So it's a good idea for them to relax, do something that they enjoy, and try not to think about the test. Just get some sleep at night, of course. It's important to have the ID that they use when registering for the test on them on the day of the test. Again, they used with the ID, they register with one ID, they need to bring the same ID to the test venue on the day of the exam. For the speaking part, it's a good idea to come a bit earlier because sometimes it happens that they can take the test earlier if someone doesn't show up. At the moment, thanks to COVID-19, it is possible to use your own pen or pencil during the exam. So they can bring their own if they want to, if it makes them feel better. It does matter to some people. No personal belongings are allowed in the test room. So yes, they will check, have a look at their ears. They will make sure they're not wearing any watches or phones, or do not have their phones on them. Drinking water is allowed, but all of the labels should be removed from those bottles. There should be no writing whatsoever or any objects which are in the test room. And of course, the most important one is don't panic. All right, so this is all from me now. So if you have some time, you can ask me questions. It would be interesting to see if I can answer them or not, so please shoot. Is there anything you'd like to know about IELTS that I know that I can help with? Please write them in the chat box. All right. Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you very much. It was lovely to see you here. Official Cambridge Guide to IELTS. Tatiana, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure I can picture that book right now. I hope there are no people from Cambridge University Press here right now. I will say that some people say that Cambridge books are most reliable. I'm not sure. I'm not saying that that is a bad book. I don't remember the book that I used there. Let me have a look. The complete guide to IELTS. So I think this is the one that I showed. So if you're asking about the book that you saw on one of the slides, I will say that yes, that is a good book. Because it gives you a lot of practice and some information about the task types, and that's of paramount importance. Again, this is the first edition of the book. This is a relatively new book. That's why I myself have found some mistakes. So some of the answers in the answer key are different from the real answers. So it's a good idea to do the tasks before you give them to the students. The other one. Tatiana, you have my details. You can send me a link to the book. I'll have a look and I will help. I wouldn't say that's outdated. So it was published in 2014. I still use some of the books which were published even earlier than that time, because I feel that there are a lot of good books which are no longer published. You understand that we're living in the world of business, and well, they publish what sells best. So I don't know, just send me the link to the book. All right, and we can have a chat about it. Yeah. All right. Well, there are a lot of books that you can find online. So Alina is asking about PDF resources. Yes, of course, there are a lot of books and some older books. One of my favorite books is focused on academic IELTS. And you can find it only online. I don't think you can find I don't think it's published nowadays. It was a Pearson book, so you could check. But if you cannot find it, you can definitely find a PDF. I'm not advertising that approach, but if it's no longer published, this is the only thing we can do right now. For the 8th grade student as a preparation for taking IELTS in the future? This is a good question. Thank you, Oksana. So Oksana is asking which exam I would recommend. We've had those talks before. Normally, if they have to take IELTS, they need to take it when they graduate from school, from high school, because this is the exam they need to enter university. I would say that for the 8th grade, I would recommend taking Cambridge Preliminary, if they're strong enough, or starting with Cambridge exams, with the main suite exams. So probably A2 key, then B1 preliminary, and B2 first. B2 first, or also known as the FC, is actually my favorite exam, because this is the exam which really helps them to improve their, not only the exam taking skills and the strategies, but it helps them to develop the language and develop their skills, their English skills, especially in the format that's in Ukraine, where we teach English as a foreign language and they cannot speak it outside. So I would recommend for high school students to take FCE, let's say by the 10th grade, and then spend the last year of school preparing for IELTS, if they need to take IELTS. Right. Well, do you have any other questions? Right. Thank you. Well, that's a good question. It depends on the level of the student and the age, of course. Normally, B1 preliminary is not a very difficult exam. So if they are intermediate, good intermediate, they just need to learn about the format of the exam, do some exam practice tasks, and just take it. The good news is that a lot of preparation is integrated into general English books for teenagers. So this can make it even easier for them to take the exam. Again, depends on the level. B1 is intermediate. So they need to be intermediate, and then if they are at that level, they can just do some exam practice tasks and take the exam. All right. Okay, so thank you very much. Again, if you'd like to learn more about exams, even about main suite exams, Cambridge exams like B1 or A2, please send me an email, because we are an exam center, so we can provide you with some, first-hand information about exams, about Cambridge main suite exams. And here's my email. If you have any questions, please get in touch. And here's the link to our website. You can find the information about our exam center there, about our teacher training, anything. So thank you very so I think I'll think about the presentation. There will definitely be a video. Probably I will send you a PDF of the main points. All right. If you'd like to get my presentation, please get in touch with me. Send me an email. I'm not going to publish it, but I could send you the main summary. All right. Let's do it this way. The video will be available. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today on this Saturday, and enjoy the rest of the weekend, and hope to see you at our future events. Okay, so goodbye and have a nice day. Bye.